What's up, everyone? It's AJ. Before I go on here and talk about how I studied for the CCRN and PASS, I just wanted to say I hope you're having a good day. The day I filmed these clips, I was definitely down in the dumps and feeling a bit off, so I decided to just, go out, enjoy some much needed sunlight, and kind of took myself out on a date, if you will. Me time. Okay, so first off, what is the CCRN? The CCRN is a certification granted by the AACN, the American Association of Critical Nurses, for critical care registered nurses. Directly from the AACN itself, the CCRN, quote, validates the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for safe and effective practice as an RN or APRN who provides direct care to critically ill patients. As for the format of the exam, it's 150 questions total with a max of 3 hours and taken on a computer. I think you're actually able to take it at home right now, but I opted to take it at a testing center. Unlike the NCLEX, you take all 150 questions and it's not adaptive to your previous performance. 25 of those questions are sample questions and are not tested, but you don't really know which ones they are. Passing and failing is determined by a raw score. Every few years, the cutoff for passing is changed, I'm assuming because the exam questions are changed. For my exam, 83 questions out of 125 was the passing score. When it comes to how long I studied for the CCRN exam, I definitely played the long game. I started officially studying in March and sat for the exam in June, so give and take around 3 months of studying. The reason I did this was because I wanted to be able to see what I was studying in practice. For example, I remember learning about the low stretch and high peak that are delivered to patients in ARDS. When my COVID patient was intubated, the original settings were set to standard tidal volume and peak. But having learned about ARDS in my content review, I called the provider and advocated for a smaller tidal volume and higher peak so that it was appropriate for my patient in ARDS. And he was like, of course, and thanked me for catching that error. Okay, so here's the real meat and potatoes of this video. This is what I used to study for the exam. I used a wide range of resources, but had two main ones and wrote all my notes in my binder. Funny enough, this is the same one I used for my NCLEX. In my binder, I separated it into different sections. The first being the first resource I used, which was the Barron's book. This book is a great and concise way to review content. I am a very tactile learner and learn by repetition, so every time I did practice questions, I wrote down everything I didn't know and reviewed it many times over. The next resource I used was PASS CCRN, both the book and the question bank. This book is like one of those resources you'll find in a library and should not be something you should read from front to back for content review. If you have a question about something, you search for the very specific and scientific answer in this book. The question bank is really what'll get you to pass the exam. It's over 1,100 questions and you can customize from which sections you want to take them from. Practice is my best advice. Read these rationales and write them down somewhere to review later. When you get a question wrong, know why you get it wrong. Comparing Barron's practice tests and PASS CCRN questions, Barron's are much harder and definitely more specific, whereas PASS CCRN questions mimic actual questions you'll see on the real exam. I actually had a question on the PASS CCRN question bank that was nearly word for word a question on my actual exam. Another resource I used were lectures from the very popular Lorgus Ferris that I borrowed from a friend. Some aspects of the lectures were helpful, but for the most part, it was all something I could really easily learn from the Barron's book. Other things I did was write down the random mnemonics I created to remember things, and also the hemodynamic ranges, pressure ranges, and lab values that I expected on the exam. I recommend you create flashcards or Quizlet of the different values and ranges you need to know because you definitely need to commit them to memory. A lot of you might be asking the same question. How does one find time to study? Because nursing schedules are so chaotic. I didn't really structure my studying time, but for the first 2 months, I went through the Barron's book front to back and took one of the practice tests to gauge my progress at the end. And of course, I kept reviewing the topics where I felt were not my strong suits. By that, I actively sought YouTube videos to explain complex concepts like the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, hemodynamic profiles for different types of shock, the differences between systolic and diastolic heart failure, and the list goes on and on. In the last month, I really repped up my studying by doing practice tests and questions on my days off. The key in passing this exam and doing well is building stamina to tackle 150 test questions. This means blocking off uninterrupted time to do 150 questions. Yes, it takes time and it can be draining, but it gets you ready to take the exam in full. When it comes to my tips for the exam, I say take advantage of being able to mark your questions. You're able to go back to any question in your exam and mark them. Legit, for the first half of the test, I was so zoned out and I literally had no idea what was going on. But I rallied through the second half and gained my confidence back. I went back to question 1 all the way through the rest of the exam and realized I made a lot of errors, and so I fixed them. Something else I did because I was worried about not remembering lab values and mnemonics was that I brain dumped on my scratch paper and wrote down all the values and mnemonics I could remember so I could refer to them later. Turns out, referring back to them was something I kept doing throughout the entire test. I just want to close by saying that this is all from my experience, and I had the luxury of time on my hand to study. People are able to study for this exam in a week or two and pass, but my priority was learning and internalizing the information so that I could access the knowledge in the future, meaning actually applying it to my practice instead of memorizing it, then forgetting it after the exam. There is a lot of content covered by the CCRN exam, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't even learn half of what was covered on the exam prior to preparing for it. So if I can do it, so can you. And I'm rooting for you. Oh, and if you have any questions, drop a comment below, and I'll see you later, y'all. Peace.